please like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you can get notified of all the great content we have coming up. Be sure to follow me on Instagram as well. We have great content that we're putting out there weekly at Conway Barnett. Welcome to part 2 of Facing Fear and Anxiety. Today we're going to talk about how to win the mind games. You see, at the end of the day, that's all it really is. If you listen to part 1, you know that it's all in your head and your thoughts and your process and allowing the wrong thoughts to come in. Well, today I'm going to talk about how to actually win the mind games in the middle of it. And I'm going to tell a story. See, at the end of the day, to really get over this, you got to understand that you shall know the truth, and it is the truth that's going to set you free. That's the real revelation of how to get over fear and anxiety. The truth, when you start believing the truth more than you believe a lie. So today I'm going to do more of a story. I'm going to tell you a true story of what happened to me and how I was able to walk out of it. Just to let you know, at the end of the story, there's a little bit of drama, but at the end of the story, there's victory. But I'm going to tell you about the time when I was at the height of my anxieties. I went to Mexico, so on a vacation, and so let me start by saying this. With my anxiety and fear, the thing I had to face the most was traveling. It was a huge fear of mine. I really struggled. I lived in one town. I worked in another town 14 minutes away. And it just, even went to church in that other town, and it seemed like such a struggle to even be. Anytime I would be more than 5-10 minutes away from the house, I'm just thinking to myself, man, if I don't get home right now, somewhere that's safe, somewhere that's familiar, somewhere that's comfortable, I'm fixing to die. I'm going to stop breathing. My heart's going to stop beating. I'm not going to be able to swallow. My hands start getting really sweaty. My feet get really sweaty. I start getting very irritable and agitated. And the whole time I'm thinking, I gotta go home, and if I don't get home, I'm gonna die. Then if not, I'm gonna have a panic attack, and then I'm gonna be so embarrassed because I'm gonna do this in front of everybody, and no one's gonna quite understand what it is I'm going through. And that's what I dealt with for almost 7 years of my life. I had a family. My family dealt with that. I had a wife. She dealt with that. She had no idea how to handle it. But she had to deal with it. So, to start the story out, I was working at a dealership, and because of the favor of God on my life, I started having a lot of success, and just favor started coming on me. It seemed like it was such a weird thing. I was facing such fear and anxiety, but everything I touched seemed to prosper at that stage of my life. And one day I got called in the office, and the general manager of the dealership was like, hey man, and he slid me this flyer, and it said basically an all expenses paid trip to Mexico, like 40 minutes south of Cancun. The flight's paid for. Basically, I just got to get to the airport, get a passport. That's the only 2 things I had to take care of, and everything else was taken care of, the room, the food, just everything. And when he slid that, to a normal person, what an honor, what a joy. See, I didn't earn that. I wasn't even the F&I guy. The F&I guy we had, who was a dear friend of mine, he was another guy that was super blessed. He actually earned that trip, and problem was he earned a lot of trips because he was super blessed and just always winning, always had favor, and they just felt like he didn't need to go on another trip. So somehow or another, through the grace of God, I got picked to go do it, which was, such an honor. You want to talk about receiving something you didn't deserve. At the time, it didn't feel like an honor. At the time, it was like the end of the world for me, because all I knew is whenever that paper got slid across that desk and it was handed to me, and I was told that I would get to go on this trip, the first thing hit my mind was not, man, how awesome is this? What a joy. It was, man, how many people am I fixing to disappoint? Really. The guy who wasn't able to go on the trip, I'm fixing to disappoint my wife. I'm fixing to disappoint my general manager who's trying to bless me. When that paper got slid over to me, it wasn't a great joy or glee. It was, I'm fixing to disappoint everybody. And the sadness came over me. That was give to me about 11 o'clock in the day. I didn't get off till 6 or 7. So I was like, man, thank you. That's all I can say is thank you for this. What an opportunity. So I went to my office, and I couldn't call my wife and tell her. Not yet. I had to process it. How am I going to do this? How am I going to think this through? How am I going to go through this? How can I deal with this? That's what I kept thinking to myself all day. And it got closer to time to get off, and I was like, man, I've got to tell my wife. As much as I did not want her to know, I had to tell her. I had to let her know. And I just like, man, I don't know how, but this is going to work out. That's what I kept telling myself. But in the back of my mind, it was like, dude, there's no way you're going to make this trip. You're not going to be able to make this trip. You're going to panic. All you're going to do is disappoint everybody. You're going to immediately, my mind just started going in survival mode. And it was like, bro, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? So going through all of that, I was like, man, I'm just going to send her. I got to tell her anyway. I was like, because I wanted her to be excited. At least, she'll get to feel the joy tonight. So I took a picture and I sent it to her, and she didn't even quite understand what it was. I was like, hey, by the way, that was given to me, and she's so excited. No way that happened. Like, yep, we're going to talk about the favor of God, and we're both just sitting there super excited about it. Or on the outside, I'm acting like I'm excited. On the inside, my mind is just giving me 10 million reasons why I'm not going to be able to do this. So I go home that night, and it's excited. She's already called her mom, her sister, and just like, hey, we're going to Mexico and all that. And I come home, and I'm trying so hard to be excited with her. I'm trying so hard to just embrace this joy with her. And we eat supper, and about halfway through supper, I can tell it dawns on her. She's like, we're not going to be able to go, are you? You're going to have anxieties. You're going to find a way out of this trip, aren't you? And I couldn't be mad at her because she deserved, this was her blessing too. She deserved this trip. So after just kind of sitting there, I was like, no, this is going to work somehow. And she looks at me, and I remember she's like, it is going to work. We're going to figure this thing out. We're going on this trip. Get over it. Which, if you've ever had anxieties, telling someone to get over it is never something that works in their favor. So a few days pass by. We've told everybody, even everybody at work knows I'm going. So now there's no turning back because everybody knows. But every single day in my mind, I'm probably 30 days out before, or I'm sorry, probably 2 months out before we go on the trip. I've got to get a passport. We've got to get babysitters, everything else financially. If we want to do anything extra, we need extra money. So I get up, end up having some really good months. So finances was taken care of. But every day, it was so hard to sit on it because I knew this was coming in the back of my mind. Every day in the back of my mind, I was hearing, you're not going to make it. You're going to have a panic attack. You're going to die. You're not going to be able to breathe. Your heart's going to stop. Every day I would hear this. Every time I thought about the trip, I went on Google Maps and I looked at the place where I'm going, and I've tried to wrap my head around it in every way, shape, or form. I prayed for hours and hours and hours a day. God, take it from me. On top of what I was already praying, talked to my leaders and my pastors, and I fasted, and I did everything that you were supposed to do as a Christian. And just constantly, an onslaught of the attacks in my mind kept going. Just rolling, and the thoughts would roll, and they would roll, and they would roll. And it was always worst case scenario. It was always negative. It was always, I'm fixing to die. So we get time to go get a passport, and I have to take time off from work to go meet my wife, to go get our passports, to get our pictures taken and everything. And I remember, for a second there, I got excited. I was like, man, I have a felony. I'm not going to be able to get a passport. And if I can't get a passport, this ain't my fault. I mean, surely they're not going to hold me to my past. So I'm like, for a month after being completely freaked out and worried about how I'm going to do this, just the fear that I'm fixing to disappoint everyone in my life, I go to get a passport, and I'm like, this is my out. So after they do the check and everything, come to find out, everything on my record has been expunged, and I didn't even know it. And I know this sounds completely unbelievable. I have no idea how. I got arrested in a small town. I don't know if they messed up paperwork. I don't know what happened, but I was able to get a passport. And that little bit of happiness I had of being able to get out of this trip to go to Mexico completely flipped on me. And I'm like, man, it's almost like God's hands on this. I've got to take this trip. I've got to face this. See, at this time, I didn't quite understand the love of God. I just knew God as a God who put me through trials. You know, I prayed to God every single day of my life to free me from fear and anxiety. And I didn't know why he didn't. I never had a clue why he wouldn't. I mean, I did everything the Bible said. I asked, I knocked, I begged, I crawled, I believed. I went to conferences that I could go to. I prayed, had pastors pray over me, had elders pray over me, just everything you could possibly imagine. I did. This wasn't special to me. This wasn't something I wanted to hold on to. So I didn't know why. I mean, I'm 7 years in. I didn't know why I kept having to face it. I didn't have a clue. But I just knew it was every day I'd wake up and it would be just like this heaviness and this fear of any second I'm going to die. Like any second. It's just always afraid of everything, of just being alone, to the point where like I thought I was going mentally insane. And so after we get through and I get the passport, I'm like, man, there's absolutely no way out of this now. There's not. The finances are in place, the passport's in place, everything is absolutely paid for. We have a babysitter. There's absolutely no way of getting out of it unless I just finally say, hey, I can't do it. So I just somehow or another in my mind, I dealt with the situation of this is going to happen. So it gets to the day that we got to drive down to New Orleans, which is about a 4-hour drive from where I live. And I start driving, and me and my wife are driving, and I'm trying to talk about any and everything I possibly can just to keep my mind. Even the 4-hour drive was just crazy to me. It's like there's no way, I can even do this drive, much less get on a plane, much less go to another country. Like, how am I going to do this? How is this possible? So I get in the car, and I remember sitting there, and the millions of thoughts hit my mind. And like, dude, you're fixing to die. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's just what kept happening through my mind. It's like, man, you're not going to be able to breathe. Your throat's just going to swell up and you can't swallow. Your heart's going to stop. You're going to lose your mind. You're going to go crazy. And I jump in the car with all of this just whispering in my head, and it whispers so loud. It's, you're going to go crazy. You're going to die. You're going to lose your mind. And I remember on that drive down there, all I kept doing was calling forth the things that was going to happen. I would sit there and I would call it forth. I'm like, I'm not going to lose my mind. I'm not even going to have a panic attack. And I just kept speaking it forth, and I kept telling myself the opposite of what my mind was telling me. For 4 hours, I'm trying to have a conversation and talk with my wife, and I think she knew I was freaking out a little bit and really working through it. So I'm sitting there and I'm just praying in tongues, and I'm speaking against it. I'm like, man, I do not have a spirit of fear. I do not have a spirit of fear. No matter what, anytime a thought would hit my mind, I do not have a spirit of fear. And the whole time I'm like, man, you need to go home, you need to go home, you need to go home. You're not going to be able to make this trip. I would just say to myself, I can make this trip. I can make this trip. And I looked over at my wife, and I remember I was like, man, dude, I love this girl. She deserves this trip. I can't take it from her, no matter what. I'll either die before I take it from her. And for a second, I believed that. I really did believe that. And I kept thinking about that. All of a sudden, my mind, I stopped thinking about me. I stopped thinking about my plans, my worries, my anxieties. I started thinking about her. She deserves this. This is her blessing too. I've got to conquer this. No matter what happens, I've got to conquer this. So the 4-hour drive ends. We get to the airport down in New Orleans. We pull out at the parking garage where we're going to park. And as we're walking through the corridor to get to the airport, we meet this other young couple that's from Louisiana too. They're actually part of the trip. We got a chartered plane that's going to fly us down there, so we're all going to fly together. So we meet them. we all go and we check in, we get our tickets and all that, and we are sitting there waiting on the plane. We got about another 45 minutes to an hour before the plane comes, and I'm sitting there, and for a few seconds I'm having some relief. I'm on the phone calling family and stuff like that before we go, checking on the kids. And I just remember, like, as soon as our plane landed, when they said, hey, that's our plane, and they're fueling it up and it's ready to go, I remember everything like a storm just came on me. It was just complete just takeover of my body of just straight fear that everything just went dark. I couldn't even see the sky the way it was. Like, everything changed color. Complete fear just came over me. And I remember saying to myself, I'll die before I disappoint my wife. I will die. And I truly believed it, and I was ready to die. And I know that sounds absolutely crazy because there was absolutely nothing going on with me. I made it all up in my mind. I know that now. But at the time, it was as real as it could be. So with facing all of that to a place where I'm shaking. I mean, I'm shaking. My socks are soaking wet from sweat. My hands sweaty. And I'm walking to get on the plane, and everyone else is laughing and joking and half drunk. And we get on the plane, and I sat down, and I'm like, man, I'm on the plane now. There's no going back. There's absolutely no turning around. And all the things that were speaking to my head began to stop. Because I was on a plane at a stage where we were taking off, and there was absolutely no turning back. At this stage of my life, I burnt all the boats, and I had to go take an island. It was victory or death. There was absolutely no turning back. And it's like my mind grabbed that. It grabbed that truth. It grabbed the truth that God was the one that orchestrated all of this. This was His plan, His trip. He did all this. This is what He wanted to do. This was what He gave me this. This was not by my own doing. This is not something I earned. This is by His grace and mercy. This is by leadership that He had over me that began to bless me in this. He was the one that provided this. He was going to protect me on this trip. And I began to believe that. And it became so real to me. So real. And the flight went on, and it was actually not a bad flight. Was able to communicate with my wife for like the first time, having like real conversations without me being in complete fear and worry and anxiety. And I remember when the plane landed, I just, all of a sudden, there was an excitement that went over me. It was a newness. I'm in another country. I'm seeing things I've never seen before. I remember getting off the plane, and it was so hot and humid, it almost felt like I had to cut the air to walk through it. And I was there, and I'm like, man, I made it. This is going to happen. And we get to where we have to go through customs, and they ask a question, and I accidentally checked the wrong box. We're with a large group. They ask a question, do you have $10,000 or more on you in cash? And I checked yes by accident. So in the middle of everything else, I'm there. Like, all of a sudden, I'm in this relaxed state. I've got this cool state of mind. I'm going to conquer this thing. I'm really doing it. I'm in Mexico. There's no turning back. It's either I'm going to enjoy Mexico or I'm going to die. That's where I was all of a sudden. It was such a great place to be. Like, it really was a great place to be. It was all or nothing right now. It was victory or death. It was, I'm going to win this thing or I'm going to die. So I was like, forget it. If I'm going to die, I might as well go ahead and live the best life I can while I'm down here. So with all of that being said, we get called out of line, and I'm like, oh man, this is it. I'm fixing to spend my whole time in Mexico in jail or something, because all of these people with badges and stuff came, pulled us out of line. They pulled us in this other room, and they were like, hey, why do you have that much cash with you? And we're like, oh man, no, we totally don't have that much cash. Complete mistake. And they're like, oh, okay, well, go redo your paperwork. So they put us back in line. We completely get cut off from our group, which normally that would have gave me like complete fear and anxiety. But for some reason, I was like, man, I was relaxed. I had it. My mind was in the right place. So after all of that being said and done, we finally get to our room. We get to stay at the grand part of the hotel, which is very exclusive. Every restaurant was a 5-star restaurant. There was no kids allowed in that area. They even had our section of the beach cut off. And during that time, I was thinking, man, if I do have a rough time, which it wasn't perfect, there was times where thoughts tried to come back, and I had to completely rebuke them. But there was times where I had to really sit there and just do what I had to do. And I would sit there, and we had this big, huge room called the Serenity Room. It's a place for like relaxation. They had massage rooms, and they had this beautiful pool. And in the morning, that thing wouldn't open till like 8. Problem was, I was getting up at 5. I built a habit of getting up at 5, praying between 6 and 8 every day of my life. And I didn't want to break that habit even when I was in Mexico on vacation. So it even worked out to where I went up to the place, and they're like, no, we don't open till 8. And I was like, can I just walk around? Because I like to walk when I pray. And they're like, yeah, man, go ahead. You know what? You can. We'll let you come in. You can use the pool, do whatever you want to do. And so I got to get up every morning and go and walk and pray. And, my wife, she was really enjoying the vacation. She wanted to sleep to 9 or 10. So I got to spend a lot of time with just me and God, just really just working on my mind, working on my thoughts. And I ended up completely conquering Mexico. One of my biggest fears was traveling and being alone. And I was able to do that in a whole nother country because I faced it. And sometimes when we have fear and anxiety and we allow all those thoughts to come into our mind, and they're constantly coming into our mind, and we're constantly thinking them, and we're constantly going through them, and we're constantly just replaying them over and over again in a record in our head, sometimes we just gotta go, no matter what. We gotta feel the fear and do it anyway. We gotta go. We gotta go face the fear. We gotta let truth reign, because fear, the lie of fear, is truth until we face it. So let me leave you with this and encourage you with this. If there's something that fear and anxiety has a hold on you, I strongly recommend to go face it. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I had to win many head battles before I went. But I strongly recommend you step up and go face it anyway. Feel the fear and do it anyway. The victory of it is worth so much. So figure out what it is. What lies have you begun to believe that fear is real? And go face it. Go face it and face it and face it.